This week we're going to learn a little bit more about the grammar as a function with filters, and those filters are going to come in the form of rules and constraints that govern the distribution of sounds in a language, that is where various sounds or various combinations of features do and don't occur. And if you recall, last time we introduced this idea of phonology as a generative system as basically a function that goes from more or less any conceivable set of sounds or strings of sounds and filters that almost infinite base down to the set of forms that are actually allowable or grammatical within any particular language. And this is a kind of subtle and tricky point, right? We might initially think of the way we pronounce words as basically we have a syntactic structure, it puts a bunch of morphemes in a row. We go into our mental lexicon, we retrieve the underlying phonological representation of each of those morphemes, we string them together and we say them, right? This seems pretty straightforward, but what I suggested last time is that in fact our ability to enforce the phonological properties of our language is not limited to retrieving words from our mental lexicons, that we're able to actually bring our system of implicit grammatical knowledge to bear on a potentially infinite variety of novel phonological forms. And so we're not really modeling just picking things out from the lexicon and pronouncing them anymore. We're now in the position of trying to build a formal model of a system of implicit grammatical knowledge that governs what kinds of sounds and combinations of sounds are able to be pronounced in our native language, right? So we're talking in much more abstract terms here about a computational system that can in principle be brought to bear on a variety of new forms that are not necessarily listed in our lexicon. We'll see later this semester that we need something like this even when we are just talking about existing lexical items, but that's going to wait a few weeks. For now, we're going to start building this model, and this is not a model of any particular behavior like retrieving a word from your lexicon and pronouncing it. It's a model of the implicit knowledge that underlies all of our phonological or phonetic behavior in our language, and we're going to model that as operating on a potentially infinite base of heard before or never heard before sound combinations. And the way we're modeling that is as a generative function that takes a feature matrix, fills in some features, one value for each feature, down to however many distinctive features there are in your language, and then goes on to the next segment and does the same thing. And then at some point, whenever this base feels like it, it terminates. It says, there's your input form, there's a potential word in your language, now go ahead and pronounce it, or something like that. Again, this is not modeling any particular behavior that you engage in on a day-to-day basis. It's meant to be a computational level model of what kinds of objects your phonological knowledge can be applied to, which is essentially any string of phonological features in any combination. We appear to be capable of making phonological judgments and performing phonological operations on basically any input. And so that's what this infinite base is about. What we need our grammar to do is to take this gigantic base, it's sometimes referred to as the rich base in phonology, and filter it down to allow legal or grammatical sound and feature combinations to pass through and be pronounced, while it's going to prohibit illegal or ungrammatical features and combinations of features from being pronounced. That is, it's filtering this rich base in order to produce just the actual phonological forms that are possible in our language, which by hypothesis is part of our implicit grammatical knowledge, right? So we're going to spend the next few weeks looking at some different kinds of filters, mostly in the form of phonological constraints, although we'll also be using the rule formalism, which is closely related. And we're going to do this in a bunch of different languages. And so I'm going to devote one short video to a number of different kinds of constraints and the phonological distributions that go along with them.